Breath of Fire for the Super Nintendo. Now, the Breath of Fire series is a series I hold near and dear to my heart for a few reasons. Now, the first Breath of Fire game I ever saw or ever heard of and beat and played was Breath of Fire 3 for the original PlayStation. Now, I first heard of the Breath of Fire series on the back of a Mega Man Legends pamphlet back in probably 1999. I didn't play Breath of Fire 3 until 2014. And it's definitely something that I really enjoyed. I beat 3, I beat 4, and I enjoyed both those games, and I wanted to get my hands on the original for a while now to see where the series roots kind of lies. Now, in Breath of Fire, the whole, distinction about the series is that you're secretly a dragon disguised as a human, in a way that you don't really know until you start kind of gaining the powers to transform into the dragon. Now, as cool as that sounds, the first game hit me like your traditional 16-bit JRPG, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The music was fantastic. The imagery was fantastic. And when you sit back, you kind of have to review this subjectively because it is 2020, and we're looking at a game that was released back in 1993. So you can't really expect something super run-of-the-mill based on standards that we're used to today. And that's where I think my distinction of this game is kind of coming in still at a little bit generic. Now, this was Capcom's first foray into JRPGs, even though this game was published by Squaresoft, which it kind of feels like a Squaresoft game in a way, because this game really takes a lot of hints and a lot of design elements, I think, from the early Final Fantasy games. And that's where this game to me kind of struggles to have an identity in a weird way, because where the music's great, the world's great, the dialogue isn't always serious. There are some funny characters in your team that you kind of acquire over time that do have some funny dialogue. The game itself, story-wise, you basically are trying to stop the Emperor, or the whole kingdom, the Empire, from stealing these keys to unleash a beast that's going to basically destroy the world, like a lot of JRPGs at the time did. The dragon element of this game almost feels like a side quest, though, because you're not instinctively required, at least through the way I was playing it, to become a dragon at any given point. And they don't really go into the story or the lore of the dragons and all of that. Pretty much you have to find a dragon temple, meet the requirements to get in, fight the dragon, then you gain certain abilities, certain transformations, and you can do different things as the dragons, which, if you do get all of them, it does make the final boss fight very, very simple, and the final dungeon very simple for that matter. However, one thing I did like about the game is that each different character within your party does have different abilities, and to kind of make use of those abilities in certain areas of the game, you have to have them as your first party member, and then by pressing the A button on the Super Nintendo controller, they'll use their abilities to help you solve puzzles, progress in the game, and things along those lines, which that was kind of cool. And that kind of sets this game a little bit apart. Now, the game itself is about 20 to 25 hours, depending how you play. It is kind of repetitive. There is a certain amount of backtracking to it, which I wasn't a big fan of, and I did start to lose interest about 75% through this game, even though I did power through and beat it, because the game itself doesn't have a lot of flaws in the sense of things I can really nitpick. It's definitely a product of its era, and it did start a series that when you hit 3 and 4, the games became fantastic. So I think one of my biases is starting with the games I did like a little bit more, games that had a little bit more of a story to it, games that kind of explained the whole Dragonborn thing a little bit better, and pretty much, things along those lines. I've heard Breath of Fire 2 was fantastic, and that's going to be a game I have and I'm going to eventually play through. But for the first foray into the series, the game, as I mentioned, it does feel like a JRPG from 1993, which has its pluses and it has its minuses. I do love 16-bit JRPGs. I think they're fantastic. I loved Secret of Mana. I loved Final Fantasy, what ended up being 3 for us. I have to play 2 also. And I think it's just, there's enough in here that does make it stand apart, but there is also enough in here that does make it very comparable to other JRPGs at the time. You can pick this one up for probably about $40 these days. It's a good playthrough, don't get me wrong. It's a fun game. The only other thing I didn't really like were how frequent the random battles were when you were trying to explore dungeons or the world map. It seemed like every 5 steps I was in a battle, which I didn't skip any battles, which is why I think I was prepared for a lot of the bosses, because this game will have a certain level of grinding to it. But what's also good is the game doesn't have a game over scenario. It kind of just transports you back to the last save point you used, which is good. It works out in that aspect, and I do appreciate that, because technically that means I never died in this game. I may have withdrawn from battle, but I was able to go right back to where I needed to be, reevaluate my strategy, and overcome what I had to overcome. So with that being said, in 2020, is Breath of Fire worth the playthrough? Well, it is on the Nintendo Switch Online service, so if you guys do subscribe to that for $20 a month, you can play it, and the second one there. So if you don't have a Super Nintendo, if you don't want to shell out like the $40 for the cart, that might be a better way to play it at this point in time. For a JRPG of 1993, I will review this at maybe a 7.8 to an 8 on the review scale. It's not bad, but I don't think there's enough here that sets it apart from other games at the time. But for what it doesn't really do anything wrong. I just think there could have been more in the story department and more in the dialogue, because you do have your overarching story, but each mission felt like something different. It didn't really, to me at least, feel like it tied in to this story they were trying to portray. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, that's my little quick review on Breath of Fire for the Super Nintendo. If you guys have played it, leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. What did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Am I wrong about certain things I'm saying? Let me know. Let me know how certain things tie together. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding it. As always, thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Until next time, I'll catch you later, guys. Breath of Fire. Check it out. Have a good one.